Hi, and welcome to another LegacyCast here in the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy YouTube channel. I'm Jim Stark, the Executive Director of the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy. We're here to talk about sports again and also give you a historical perspective. Joining me today, once again, is one of our favorites, Rob Otto. Robbie, it's great to see you again.
Thanks,
of course,
Jim. Good
one
to
of
be
the
here.
former radio voices of the Detroit Pistons.
Right.
Big week in Pistons history this week.
Yes, they finally decided after about 2 months after the season was over for the Pistons that having a head coach would be a good idea.
But aren't they kind of doing out of order, though, by having a coach before they have a general manager, even a president of the team?
Are you trying to say that the Pistons are backwards? Because I would be hard to argue against that.
Well, just to give you a little bit more about Rob's background, he was the radio voice for the pre and the post game show for a number of years on WDFN. Mm-hmm. How many years were you involved with the Pistons?
Well, let's see. Matt Derry was the main pre and post game host. So once I started at WDFN in 2003. I had a spattering of games that I would do because Jason Hillman was still around and he was the primary backup to Diesel. And then all the way through the sweep by the Cavaliers of 2009, I was the secondary person, and basically Diesel and I were doing about 50% of the games.
You were on there a lot, yeah.
Quite a bit, right. And then Matt Derry left that final Pistons season to go over to the other radio station to go to 97.1 The Ticket. And so the second half of that 2008-2009 season, I was 100% doing all the pre and post game, including all the playoff games. And well, there were only 4 of them, and they lost all 4 of them.
They were easy to count on one hand.
Yes, there wasn't a lot of playoff games that year.
Tell us about your recollections of the coaching situation as we look at the new coach that was just named.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I first came in, Rick Carlisle was still the head coach. He had those 2 seasons here and was very successful.
Oh, yeah.
But when you get a chance to hire a Hall of Famer with the pedigree that Larry Brown does, they let Rick Carlisle go.
I thought it was partly because Rick Carlisle did not fit into the world of the Pistons at that time as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Davidson was still alive at the time, and he and Rick Carlisle just apparently didn't get along.
Right, that's what I heard.
Very well.
It was a personality issue, basically.
It was as much, but the secondary thing of saying, okay, if there's no great coach out there, I think they would have worked out their differences and said, okay, well, if you can give me 60 wins a season, I guess I can put up with you. But if I can bring in this other guy who I like and is also going to give me 60-plus wins a season, then we can make that work. And that's pretty much when it transitioned into the Larry Brown era.
It's not unlike 1979 in the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers had Les Moss as their manager. They groomed him for a number of years, and he was the guy. And actually, he was 3 or 4 games over 500 when Sparky Anderson became available.
Right.
And it's sort of the same thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And Larry Brown was, nobody expected him to be available. And then nobody expected how quickly he could take the success that Rick Carlisle had. I mean, we thought this would be a 3-4 year building process, and it was immediately that he got the team to the point where they were playing the right way.
Well, and Larry Brown's history was always that his immediate impact was always in the near. It was his length that was always the challenge. His welcome wore out pretty quickly, but he was always impactful in that early stage.
Yeah, the interesting thing, until later years when Larry Brown went to the Knicks, he could always say he never left a program in worse shape than he was when he got there.
Right.
That changed when he went to the Knicks. But yeah, every place he had been, they were better when he left than when he got there. But he's a bit of a carpetbagger. He was a bit of a guy that was looking at his next job, and despite all the success, 6 straight years to the at least Eastern Conference Final, back-to-back finals appearances, the one ring that I think could have easily been more.
Yeah.
You get Rasheed to guard Bob Orry. But okay, I'm sorry. We just gave everyone awful flashbacks. I apologize for that. But it was when Larry started talking about, oh, yeah, I can see where my next job is. I've always wanted to coach for the Knicks. And listen, you think Bill Davidson didn't like Rick Carlisle. As soon as Larry Brown said that, Bill Davidson hated Larry Brown.
Bill Davidson had a thing about loyalty.
That was it. Yeah, absolutely.
Bill Davidson was loyal to a degree that, you could do whatever you wanted, but except for be disloyal. That's exactly really what Isaiah Thomas is fine. When he tried to cut Tom Wilson out of the picture, that crossed the line with Mr. D.
Because of the loyalty that Mr. D had with Tom Wilson. It was extremely well-founded. But, I mean, that was months after Bill Davidson came out and said Isaiah will be a Piston for life.
Until he crosses us.
As far as Bill Davis was concerned, Isaiah was dead to him on that day, and so he kept his promise, apparently.
So Larry Brown wears out his welcome.
Wears out his welcome.
And after that, there really has been a track record of decreasing production and quality of coaches.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the Flip Saunders era was still a good era. He kept up that stretch of the team making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They were still a good team.
He didn't have whatever it was of taking that last step, though.
No, he did not. And the team itself was going down. That loyalty that Mr. Davidson did. He kept players around too long. I mean, that was it. I mean, and then when he finally decided, okay, it's time to trade somebody, they traded the one piece they couldn't trade. They traded Chauncey. I mean, they should have traded Rip. They should have traded Ben Wallace. That's who they should have gotten rid of, because Chauncey was still at a championship level point guard and still had his shot, whereas Rip, his whole game was being quick around the court. He can't create his own shot, but man, he can come off a pick with the best of them and get that quick shot up. As soon as he couldn't do that anymore, I think they could have still gotten value for him. Tayshaun Prince, they could have gotten value for. And so they traded the one piece they shouldn't have traded, the whole Allen Iverson deal. And people make fun of the Allen Iverson deal. The deal in and of itself was good. The problem was what the Pistons did with that cap space. They knew they were only bringing Iverson in for the 1 year. If he works out, great. But if not, after this year, we get $10 million. It turned into Ben Gordon, and it turned into Charlie Villanueva. That was the problem that Joe had.
You speak about loyalty to a fault. Well, Mr. D was probably too loyal to Joe Dumars for too long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Joe Dumars had proven that he was not good at drafting.
Yeah.
And that's Detroit. This is an issue with the Pistons and really the Detroit team, and it even goes to the Red Wings when they had to stop spending more money than everybody else. Detroit is not a destination city for sports teams. All right. The only thing that they had was, do you want to wear the Old English D? Do you want to wear the winged wheel? Pistons never had that.
Right.
So it was trades and drafts. That's how you're going to build your team. It's how they're going to build the team from here on out. It's the only thing that they have, the only option that they have, because it is not a destination city, the way that Miami is, the way that LA is, even to some extent the way New York is.
Well, but in the Pistons' defense, a lot of teams in the NBA are not.
Correct.
Who still can win. But so let's get back to the coaching only for a second, because now you begin this revolving door of names, no names, partial names, but none of them proved successful.
No, the loyalty thing comes back to bite the Pistons again, because they had Michael Curry, who was on Flip Saunders' staff. Flip Saunders did not hire Michael Curry, but they fired Flip to make Michael the head coach. What they should have done is kept Flip for the last year of his contract with Michael still there. And then if it's not working out, then you make the transition that year and see what Michael Curry can do. Curry only lasts 1 season. That leads into John Kuester, who only lasts 2 seasons. That moves into Lawrence Frank, who only lasts 2 seasons.
And Lawrence Frank actually had the track record in New Jersey of being a good, productive coach, and for some reason could not replicate that in Detroit.
Not even close. But again, I think a lot of it came to personnel. Mo Cheeks is the next one to bring in. Every one of these coaches I just mentioned ended up being worse than the one before.
Right.
That eventually leads to Stan Van Gundy. At least he had some longevity.
Well, and what happened in between? Of course, Mr. D dies.
Yep.
And they bring in, and Mrs. D, finally sells the team. Now Tom Gores comes in. So now we have a whole new change, and they went with a whole different direction, which was putting one person in charge of everything. And now, 4 years later, that didn't really work.
Yeah, no, that didn't work. And it turned out that we thought Joe Dumars was bad at drafting people. Just take a look at what Stan Van Gundy did.
Well, all right, so let's cut to the chase now. Do you give much hope now for this new regime?
He's starting so far behind the 8 ball because of what I think was an awful trade by Stan Van Gundy to get Blake Griffin here. He's a name. He is no longer the player that he was. He's not a superstar. He's barely a star. I mean, he hasn't been to an all-star game in 6 years, I believe, and we owe him $30 million a year for the next 2 or 3 years. So, yeah, if they're willing to stick with Dwayne Casey for the first 3 really bad years and see if they can get some young talent behind that, then when things open up, when Drummond is gone and when Griffin is gone, maybe then they can have a chance. The question is, will the low ticket sales scare them into making a change, or are they going to give Dwayne Casey a real shot?
Well, the bottom line as we wrap this up, Robbie, is that between Chuck Daly and Larry Brown, you had those two successful, big-name, all-time Hall of Fame coaches. In between, not a lot to brag about.
Yeah, not a lot to brag about.
We thank you for joining us today, Rob Otto. Once again, share with us where we can read your work and hear about your other
Find
adventures.
out my columns. I always post them. Best place to find me is on Twitter. We're going to put it right at the bottom of the screen. It's at OttoManThoughts. At OttoManThoughts on Twitter. Follow me there. You'll be able to find all the stuff that I write.
Well, Rob Otto, as always, is great. We'll have you back real soon. For our LegacyCast team, I'm Jim Stark of the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy. See you next time.